The Steven Soderbergh trailer dropped, and the European Film Award noms were released this week, but we're more interested in the Gotham Awards. Kevin Jagernauth, we have a couple of categories that we can look at. Is this an event that you get excited for?
Usually no, but I think, I mean, it's one of many awards in a long award season. But the nice thing about the Gothams is that they usually put the spotlight on a lot of the kind of smaller films that you and I love. So, and particularly in a year where these films have more of a chance to go on to Oscar glory,
Mhm.
the Gothams are pretty significant this year.
So the Gotham Awards are actually the first one out of the gate. They've always been. Usually it's towards the end of November, beginning of December. Not this year, but the next edition is going to be on January 11th. So that's before Sundance, and it's several months before the Indie Spirit Awards. So I agree with you. It does give the spotlight on a lot of the smaller titles. And it's something that I never really put too much weight because every single category is voted by a very small jury in terms of um, who the nominations are. Um, and so we had sort of, as the year was progressing, we sort of thought that this would be a Eliza Hittman fight versus Kelly Reichardt versus Nomadland, and it turns out that might be the case here. So let's handicap a couple of main categories, beginning with Best Feature. And what we know this year is people who identify as a she or her will win the Best Feature category. So, Kevin, let's go through the noms. We have The Assistant, First Cow, Never Rarely, Sometimes Always, Nomadland, and perhaps the surprise of the category, Relic by Natalie Erica James. It's her directorial debut. This feature was part of the lineup at Sundance in the their horror section, the midnight section. So, what were your first impressions at an all-female category?
It was awesome to see all the features directed by women. That's kind of a big deal. I was happy to see The Assistant get some love. I think it was an excellent film, and I'm glad that even though it was released, I think in February, it hasn't been forgotten. And Relic is a big surprise. I think it's a big boost for Natalie Eric James, and I think we shouldn't forget that Jake Gyllenhaal and the Russo brothers put themselves as producers on that film, so they clearly recognize her talent as well. So she will be a filmmaker certainly to watch, and certainly getting much more attention as the award season comes on.
I believe she's already in the writing phase, packaging her next feature. Um, so clearly, this category for me belongs to Nomadland. I don't see how First Cow or Never Rarely, Sometimes Always. I don't see how. I feel as if those two might cancel themselves out. Um, do those odds make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it still stands as true now as it did in September, that Nomadland is really going to be the film to beat, I think, across the board, both with, the Gothams and the Indie Spirits, and at the Oscars as well. I mean, there's few films this year that have been as universally loved as that film has been.
You're right about that. So yesterday, the Twitter embargo was lifted on the reactions to Ma Rainey's, and it looks like no one will stand a chance in the Best Actor category. So um, let's look at the nominees and why I just gave the thumbs up to Chadwick Boseman as a win.
Yeah, so we have Riz Ahmed for Sound of Metal, Chadwick Boseman for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Jude Law for The Nest, John Magaro for First Cow, and Jesse Plemons for I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Kind of interesting in this category, 3 of the 5 nominees are in streaming films, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a pretty strong array of talent. But you're right, it could be. It more than likely we're looking at a Boseman win.
Yeah, and I'm happy for Jude Law. I saw The Nest at Sundance, and I thought it was a remarkable performance, layered character, and I th- I don't think Jesse Plemons is getting enough credit for his performance. It's just a nutty, dark, early September release from Netflix that I'm happy that it got um, added to the list here. But I don't see that those two performances overtaking what we still don't know. We don't know Chadwick's performance yet, but like I was saying, the Twitter storm last night, yesterday, was fairly positive in his direction. So, do you think this is something that'll extend itself to the Oscars and potentially the Indie Spirits as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think we can expect to see this continue. This love for Chadwick Boseman continue. I think we'll see it for the next few months ahead. And you make a good point about Jesse Plemons. I mean, that's the kind of role. I mean, it's not a showy performance. It's certainly a character that's not particularly likable, and those kind of performances often get overlooked. So you're right. It's kind of nice that he gets some credit here for his work.
So, in the Best Actress category, I'd argue that we have also a clear front runner. What's sort of notable here in the one of the major snubs, perhaps, for the Best Picture, Best Feature category is Minari, and I don't believe you've seen it yet.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
So yeah, it reminds me that's perhaps the biggest snub here, and it's perhaps a mistake on A24's part where they positioned it a little bit too late on the calendar. Do you think that might be the case?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. A24 has quite a few films that, or maybe not quite a few, but a couple films that I think we would have expected in a normal year to get a bit of an awards push. I know there's like Twitter conversation about Minari, but I don't know how extensively they've sent out screeners and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also that what's that Riley Keough film from Sundance?
That's
Um,
Sola, so that hasn't shored up. Um,
no, but A24 had a teaser for it like 2 months ago, and then nothing. So it's been a weird. A24's sort of how they're navigating COVID has been a bit touch and go. Like I haven't really figured out what their strategy is. So yeah, it's a bit surprising not to see it here, but it could just be a product of they haven't been pushing it that much, at least not yet. I mean, we'll see what they still have quite a long road ahead before Indie Spirits and Oscars and those kind of things. So we'll see where it goes.
yeah, and it did win the grand jury prize, and it won the audience award at Sundance. So that's there's perhaps a miscalculation there.
Yeah.
Specifically in this category, I wanted to mention the excellent performance of Haley Bennett in Swallow. I would have loved
But
to.
yeah, but let's first. I don't think we've run through the nominees, so I'll just run
Yeah,
through them
sure, go
quickly.
for it.
We have Nicole Beharie for Miss Juneteenth, Jessie Buckley for I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which I think is just as much of a surprise as Jesse Plemons. Carrie Coon for The Nest, Frances McDormand, as expected, for Nomadland, and I'll try and pronounce this correctly, Young-Jun Yoon for
Yeah,
Minari.
yeah. So the
But you're right.
category.
Sorry, go ahead about Haley Bennett.
Well,
Sorry,
that's
I
a,
interrupted.
I'll go back a bit there and to say that Carrie Coon actually she's aces in The Nest as well, and I'm happy to see her part of this the included in this 5-person slot. But yeah, going to Haley Bennett, a very awkward, difficult film to promote, and more or less going with the same line of thinking that you're putting out there for Jesse Plemons. Not an unlikable character, but there's just so much queasiness in Swallow that normally I don't know. I'm thinking back to Toni Collette's performance with the in the Ari Aster film, and it sort of like belongs to that category where it's not a dramatic role. It's just an awkward duckling role, and I could see why she perhaps didn't get enough love in this category here.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny. I just watched Swallow a few nights ago. I loved it. That was a great film. And yeah, she's really remarkable. And you're right. It's a performance where it's it's very internal for a lot of the film, and it's very mannered in a very particular way. But it's great work. And you're right. I think it's a film that probably could use a bit more love across the board. But it's a tricky one. I mean, it's a very specific kind of tone it goes with, and you either ride that wavelength or you don't. But it's a great film, so go see it. Go see it, everyone.
Definitely a hard sell. We'll next tackle the best screenplay category. We have Bad Education, and I'll come back to Bad Education after unveiling the noms. But we have First Cow, the 40-year-old version, 14, and the Vast of Night. So a collection of different film entities, an exciting category. I think that this might be like the sympathy vote that goes to Kelly Reichardt because of No Man Land. That it's going to dominate the conversation. For Bad Education, it's funny because it's HBO that picked up the film, and they push it as something that it premiered at TIFF, and then it premiered on HBO as a television film. So I'm finding it awkward that it sort of like was able to find love here, or I'm not really sure how the rules apply here. And lastly, The Vast of Night was a small film out of South by, I believe, or no, actually it was from Slamdance. And Prime Video gave it a really good push. And so it's nice to see this is really a microfilm, small in budget, but large in ideas. And we at Ion Cinema, we gave it a fairly good review. So it's really an interesting category.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that this seems to be a category where films that we don't see in any of the other categories, aside from First Cow, are getting some attention. And it is cool to see The Vast of Night get some love. It was out on Amazon, similar to Bad Education. It kind of just went straight to a streaming thing. And I remember seeing like a small Twitter swirl around it, but then not hearing much after that. But it's cool. It's getting some attention and some love for those screenwriters. But you're right. I think this is probably Kelly Reichardt's win for First Cow, and deservedly so. It's a great story, great script. So
Yeah, indeed. We'll conclude with two of the breakthrough categories. One is called the breakthrough actor category, and this is a category that, gender, who cares about gender, which is a good thing. We have Jasmine Batchelor from The Surrogate, which is a very small indie film that found a lot of love and picked up a lot of buzz post South by Southwest online screening. We have one of the actors in One Night in Miami. So this is like the sole nomination, I believe, for One Night in Miami, and that's Kingsley Ben-Adir. We have the pairing in Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. Another First Cow nomination is Orion Lee, who plays King Lu, and he's the one who develops the economics of the biscuit, I believe, selling in Kelly Reichardt's film. And we also have Kelly O'Sullivan, who is the writer, I believe, co-director, and the star of this another abortion-themed film in St. Francis. So a collection of films that, belong to all these different release campaign or strategy spheres. One dating back all the way to Telluride, and one that's more recent and fresh with showing in Venice and TIFF. So, yeah, a nice coterie of actors, actresses here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is always a fun category because it just shines a light on people who make these films kind of special and don't often get the recognition. I think I'm really happy to see Orion Lee in this category. He's just so magnetic and so good in First Cow. So I'm just really happy to see that nomination. Um, yeah, I mean these are all actors that we are going to have our eye on.
For me, these latter two categories really are the fun categories because it's the type of films that a lot of people I know would have missed out on, and so it really is putting the spotlight on things that fly under the radar all the time. And the final category is the Bingham Ray Breakthrough Director Award. So we have Rada Blank for the 40-year-old version. We have Channing Godfrey Peoples for Miss Junith. We have Carlo Mirabella Davis, again, Swallow. We have Andrew Patterson for The Vast of Night and Alex Thompson for St. Francis. So going back to St. Francis, she didn't co-direct, but she co-wrote with Alex Thompson. So a lot of these films started surfing the film festival circuit in 2019. So they positioned themselves fairly early and they weren't forgotten. So that's fun. And it really is a nice collection of filmmakers that are on their first and second films. And I think Rada Blank might have the edge here. What do you think about the noms here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rada Blank certainly will have the edge. I mean, she won the directing award at Sundance for the film. I'm actually glad to see. I didn't realize Carlo Mirabella Davis. I'm glad to see him here for Swallow. That's really awesome because it's just again, it's so fresh in my mind since I just saw it. But the direction is so like precise. Like it's such a precise piece of work, a piece of direction in a way that doesn't feel like pretentious or show offy. It suits everything in the movie. So it's cool to see him get some shout out there. Um, and yeah, again, back to the Vast of Night people. That's a great journey for that filmmaker right now. And to see that recognition here is really cool.
Yeah, the Swallow is just so much fun. It's so clinical. It's so precise. The color palette is quite outstanding, and I can imagine it being having been made for like less than a million easy. And I think one snub in this category potentially might be the filmmaker for the Surrogate, which played extremely well critically afterwards. So if we had to look at the draft, perhaps it was positioned at number 6 or 7. In micro American indie film news, we now switch gears and we move on to Sean Baker, which is he worked obviously. It comes to no surprise that he works on these microfilms and that flies so low to the ground that we just learn about them just around the time where it's wrapping up. So yeah, let's talk about Sean Baker here. Red Rocket. Where was it shot? What do you think the title might mean? And what does it say about Sean Baker that he's very precise in locations. He's always moving geographically to different locales.
Yeah, he is in Texas wrapping up this film. The only things we know is that it's independently financed, probably a dark comedy, and that is about it. But you're right. His films, at least to date, have really inhabited the cities or surroundings they're set in. So that's really a huge deal. This film will star Simon Rex, who I don't know very well, but is part of the Scary Movie franchise, which is a bit surprising. But what strikes me is that Sean Baker is someone who really he excels at sort of being. I mean, all of his films to some degree have had a bit of a spirit of just being outside of the system, made with his own ideas and concepts about how they're shot and what they're trying to say. So it doesn't surprise me he's once again just channeling his own creative energy without much in the way of outside influence, which is great.
So post the Florida Project, which was a 2017 film, it got tremendous buzz for him, and I imagine he'd been offered new projects, better funding, and I think it says a lot about why I love this filmmaker so much. I presume that he'll never touch a Marvel type film. If we look into this actor that he enlisted, his past sort of like belongs to the fringe of some of these non-actors that he's worked with in the past. And also the matter that he teamed with Drew Daniels, which is a first time pairing for him. So yeah, like let's think about the visual vocabulary and what a film with Drew Daniels could look like. So Drew Daniels worked with Trey Schultz, his first three features, and namely his last feature was something that was the Vistas, which was much more larger. So are you expecting something that might fall back into the minimalist uh, contributions of Sean Baker, of the literally all his other worlds that he's created?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, but the choice of Drew Daniels is very interesting. Again, you make up a good point, particularly that Drew Daniels, his last feature was Waves, which is which was just like a huge piece. Like aside from the story itself, is took some really bold visual swings. Like it really, really went for it, um, with a lot of bold lighting, and it was just very wild, and certainly much different than we've seen Sean Baker do. Um, and just to circle back to Sean Baker in general and how he films, I mean, I follow him on Letterboxd where he posts like movies he watches, and
Mm-hmm.
he watches like a lot of like independent, weird Italian giallo and horror films and cult films and B movies, and I think all of those have that spirit of I'm just a guy with a camera and I'm going to go make something, and I think he brings that um, that sort of work ethic into his own work, which is obviously nothing like those films, but I think he uses that same spirit. Um, so yeah, I think we can expect. Um, I hope and I think we can expect that he will sort of push himself to the next phase in his storytelling, and it'll be interesting to see what that looks like.
That's worth mentioning. I've never visited Texas, but Texas is like the demographics and the backdrop of Texas is like from north to south. It's so vast and different. So
Mm-hmm.
I think once we identify which city he filmed in, or perhaps it's a road trip film, we don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
think we'll get a better idea as to how this dark comedy might turn out to be. Maybe it's a Fellini film. Maybe it's like you said, one of these fringe B film filmmakers. Maybe there's a lineage to that. So we'll get some news, but as we know, these productions are usually close to the vest until they premiere at a major film festival. So something to look out for in 2021 for sure. Perhaps past the midway point, perhaps maybe a Venice. Maybe he'll try his hand at that. A project that's been housed at Amazon is being repackaged with a new filmmaker and participation of Jamie Foxx. So I'm talking about The Burial. I think there's a lot to discuss about this project, not namely the filmmaker, but also the attraction to a project like this. So Maggie Betts has been attached to direct, and it'll probably be in her wheelhouse fairly soon. And it was a project that actually had uh, Alexander Payne interested. So I think there's like it's a weird sort of like shift. Now let's talk about the funeral home legal drama that Amazon is really big on, and the involvement of Jamie Foxx as a producer and Maggie Betts as the filmmaker.
Well, it's Jamie Foxx as producer and star.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, Maggie Betts is coming off her sort of Sundance breakout with Novitiate for this film, The Burial, and it brings her into the big leagues with Amazon with Jamie Foxx, and it's based on a New Yorker article about a funeral home owner who hires an attorney for a colorful attorney for a big lawsuit.
Mhm.
So something quite different. And yeah, even that premise alone screams Alexander Payne, who was once detached, but a very nice move for Maggie Betts to sort of pick it up, and it'll be something I think a little bit different than we've seen from her.
Yeah, for sure. No, Novoshet, I believe that's how you pronounce it, was essentially a relationship drama where a nun falls for God in a way, and so this is a completely different subject area. I mean, we're going more to greed, and I quite like the title because the burial could represent a lot of things, not only the funeral home, but also uh, sinking a person and their fortune or their business. So there's a couple of different entendres with the title. I quite like. Um, I think it is interesting that Amazon is still fiercely promoting it. And it's worth noting that Maggie Betts is also attached to a dramatic thriller about a pro-choice pioneer named activist and sorry, pro-choice pioneer and activist named Rebecca Gumpart. So that's a project that's across the pond. So she's got a couple of things in the wheelhouse right now. I don't know what else we can mention about this project, but just that it's nice to see Amazon still in the producing game and getting to a lot of different IPs and essentially giving us a 2021 and 22 that feels familiar to sort of like the work that they did with Lynn Ramsey and a lot of the projects that were in-house and in the pre-Ted Hope days, I guess. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing we can mention about this project is that the script is by Doug Wright,
Mm-hmm.
who is a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, but whose only other produced screenplay credit is from 20 years ago with Quills, which was based on his own play.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting too, that we have sort of a screenwriter involved who, well, frankly, we only have one film bearing his name, and he will be involved putting the script together. So that's a pretty interesting fact as well for this one.
Yeah, we'll soon find out just how long the Pulitzer Prize scribe was working on the project. Because if it's 20 years between projects, maybe it's been something that he's been writing on or for several years now. So there's a definite ammo for this project, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been bouncing around a while. Before it was at Amazon, it was at Sony as well. So, I mean, it's been kicking around. So maybe he wrote the script years ago and it's just finally, hopefully getting made.
Yeah, something we could see potentially in 2022 if things go well in next year.
Yeah.
Shireen Dabas, we have Denis Gurira, we have the fighting of Shirley Chisholm. So we were speaking of Maggie Betts, and this is actually a project that she was attached to. And we recently got a peek into this personality, Shirley Chisholm, through Miss America. So I think it's fun that we get to see an expanded look at what that 1972 political run might look like in a 2-hour runtime. So yeah, perhaps let's comment on this project and the sort of like the elements that have been brought to it.
Sure. So the fighting Shirley Chisholm, this is a pretty cool story. So we have Cherien Dabis, who is directing, Denai Guerrero, who will star. And it's an interesting one. It's another Amazon project that's been in development a little while. Viola Davis was once involved, but is, I guess, no longer involved anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. This was a plot line that threaded through the excellent Mrs. America, but it certainly deserves its own story. I mean, it's about, the first Black female member of Congress, who also becomes the first person of color to try and get the Democratic Party nomination. And as we saw in the series, there was just a lot of um, things that she had to fight against, both inside the party and inside the feminist movement, and outside, just with the public in general, just to do what she wants to do. So it's a remarkable story, and I think it's a pretty cool character. It's a great character for an actress to play.
For the actress, she's a little bit less buzzy than Viola. I discovered her through Andrew Dusimo's Sun Muse first two feature films, which was Restless City and The Mother of George. Both of those premiered at Sundance. She's a very picky actress. I was looking at her IMDb page, and she only has a couple of projects a year. She's not in Kate Blanchett territory. So I was reminded that she's very picky about her projects. Now she's sort of like fallen into like more popcorny territory. And as far as the director is concerned, she hit it out of the park with a couple of smaller indie films that were at Sundance with America and May in the Summer, which was a 2013 release. But since then, she's gradually moved to television with the center and more peculiar, more specifically, Rami. That was a huge deal for A24. I believe it's their first TV series, and so she shot half a dozen projects there. So she's in a major uptick in her career, and I'm quite happy to see her fall back into feature after having done a lot of different directing gigs in television.
Yeah, it's a cool move. It's a cool step for the director. But I mean, let's not underplay Denai Guerrero too much. I mean, she's a big part of the Marvel universe
Yeah.
as well, and broke out on The Walking Dead, which is a huge show. I mean, obviously things that we don't talk about here, but I mean, she's not an unknown by any sense. But yeah, you're right. The past few years, it's mostly been the Marvel world. But this is, yeah, if you're going to step out of it into a project, this is certainly a great one to do that with.
Yeah, and to take on somebody who is like an iconic figure in the women's movement, it's going to be huge shoes to fill. And if we sort of like project where this might be in the release date, this might actually be through Joe Biden's like the midway point of his presidency. So that means like we can look at Kamala Harris and say, well, we can make a link there politically if you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of television projects, I believe this director needs an app in the App Store just so that we can follow all the projects that he's involved with. And now he's turning to another miniseries. I'll let you spoil it.
Sure.
I'll let you unveil what we're talking about here. It's a BBC property, potentially, and has been visited many times over. So, Kevin, what are we talking about here?
So we were talking about Luca Guadagnino doing Brideshead Revisited for BBC. And you're right, this is one of approximately 500 projects that the director has going at any moment. But what's interesting is he seems to juggle these projects, and then whichever one has like the juice to shoot next, that's what he jumps to. And so the plan is for this to shoot in the spring of 2021.
Yeah.
It follows his HBO series, We Are Who We Are, which I think has just wrapped up or will be wrapping up soon, airing. And the most intriguing part is the talent involved. I mean, these are not TV actors. We're talking about Ralph Fiennes, Kate Blanchett, and Andrew Garfield, which is about as big as it gets. In terms of a cast, I think for me, the thing that will be interesting to see is, I think you alluded to this a moment ago, Brideshead Revisited has been adapted for television and on the BBC approximately 29 times. So I'm a bit interested to know what the take is here, or what the filmmaker wants to do with the material.
Yeah, I think about it. I think of Ivory Merchant, costume drama type things. I put it in a box, and I'm sure the lens or like his approach is going to be a really fresh take on it. It's not going to be Suspiria take type, but he'll certainly cherry pick some focal points and look at all these relationship dynamics from a different lens. So it's something to look out for potentially in late 2021. And they're still working on assembling the project, but apparently this guy from the BBC has been flying Luca in, and they've been having many, many discussions. So it's something that hasn't been necessarily mentioned before, but as you said, it's probably we're at a fast moving juncture, and it might actually be his next project for all we know.
Yeah, I mean, it is gearing up apparently to shoot in the spring, so I can't imagine he's gonna fit something in between. But God knows, like who knows? Who knows what the next 2 weeks will bring? Like he's always doing something. But it is interesting from a cast perspective. I mean, he worked with Ray Fiennes on A Bigger Splash, and Ray Fiennes was great in that film. It was really different.
Absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, like just a really different role for him. Really came alive. So it'll be interesting to see how he uses him here. And I mean, Cate Blanchett's always great. And Andrew Garfield's certainly at a point in his career where he's just jumping out and doing different things. He's just off the festival circuit with Mainstream. Um, yeah, so a costume drama, yes, but hopefully one that will be a little bit different.
Yeah, actually, that I want to add further to that note. Garfield is really taking on new, interesting roles, and I was thinking of David Robert Mitchell's film that was at Cannes 2 years ago, I believe, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think he's a lot more selective and picky about what he's merging himself to, and yeah, perhaps his career will pick up steam, kind of like a Jake Gyllenhaal or maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, he has The Eyes of Tammy Faye coming up. I mean, I think that's in post with Jessica Chastain. So maybe that'll be like a Sundance selection kind of thing. So you're right. He's just making interesting choices and working with projects that are just, I think he just wants to have fun and challenge himself. And I think he's doing just that.
That's a great position to be in. We conclude with a last tidbit of news. If Claire Denis smokes a cigarette, it's news to us. I guess anything she picks up is we're always anticipating her films. And in the same week that we got a project or status update on her next feature, I mean, it's just the most bizarre thing sometimes how we get news. And the people at the film stage uncovered a little tidbit of news which came out of nowhere. So yeah, let's talk about the project that she's working on next that got delayed, and then what the hell is she working on next?
So we've all been eagerly awaiting Claire Denis to reteam with Robert Pattinson for Stars at Noon, which also I believe has Margaret Qualley attached. But that film keeps on getting delayed and pushed back. But thankfully, everyone involved seems to still want to make it. But yeah, Pattinson's busy being Batman, so the film can't be made. So Claire Denis is going to go shoot a film with Juliette Binoche, who she's worked with before, on Let the Sun Shine In, and with Vincent Lindon, who she worked with on Bastards. And yeah, the news, I don't even really understand exactly how it came out, but through an auction listing where one of the prizes is lunch on the set of the film. So
it's just the most funniest thing.
Which is bananas, absolutely bananas. But it does mean we have a new Claire Denis film on the way. And when I don't know, do you think we'll see it sooner rather than later?
So, okay, so we're in November, and it's very possible she does a small shoot. Perhaps this is, you mentioned Let the Sun Shine In. That was a really condensed film. Juliette Binoche is essentially, she's indoors a lot and she's crying her life away. So, Claire Denis, if she were to make a film, she could literally do it in the next 2, 3, 4 months. And perhaps she's been working on this project for a while. We just don't know about it. She tends to be tight-lipped, and sometimes she gives things a little bit more girth or latitude in order to get funding. But why not? I mean, if filmmakers like Jacques Audiard and Céline Sciamma are like, they're making stuff right now in Paris and in parts of France. That's how the French work. They refuse to let the current conditions sort of like prevent them from getting out there and being creative. And I think the fact that, yeah, like you were saying, A24 set up this next project for a while. They've been talking about it for the last 2, 3 years. So I think if you have all the perimeters in place, then why not go and make a smaller film, perhaps? For the film festival circuit, I don't know. I think it's a toss-up. I don't see her going into another production and sort of like abandoning a project and not going the full 9 yards with it. So she could potentially be in the editing room for all of the latter point of 2021 and come out with guns blazing with 2 films in 22. But again, we're basing our info or our intel on an auction. For all we know, it could have been a commercial shoot.
You're right. But I will say, I will just counter this, that Let the Sun Shine In was shot in January 2017, wrapped in February, and was in Cannes in May.
Wow.
Of the same year. Like, she just cranked it out. So it would be really cool if this was a similar situation. But you're right. It could be a commercial, could be a fashion thing. Like, we have no idea. But Vincent Lindon tends to be like, he doesn't do those kind of things generally. Like, I think that might be the giveaway, that maybe it's an actual film and not something else.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I mean, let's not discount that Thierry could have yet another film out of like about 500 to choose from for Cannes 2021. It's going to be ridiculous. They're either going to have to expand that lineup or have 2 editions. I don't know what he's going to do.
Well, actually, I'll end on one thing, is like, if Cannes does get pushed back a little bit because Thierry is sort of like considering other options, and I mean, it's complicated with the Palais to book the Palais, but the people at the Palais sort of like gave 2 other possible festival dates, so it might actually work in her favor furthermore. So we'll see, but yeah, take this one with a grain of salt. But we'll probably be talking about the project next week as we find out, like, it's been shooting on the streets of such and such.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next week, along with whatever Luca Guadagnino announces in the next 5 days. So
that's great. Well, thanks for a little bit longer edition of IndieSponge, and we return next week with a couple more episodes in the can before the holidays. So we return next week with episode 30. So thanks for tuning in, folks, and thanks as always, Kevin.
Always a pleasure.
I'm Eric Lavallée. I'm editor-in-chief and site owner for IONCINEMA.com, and this is
Kevin Jagernauth, contributing writer for the playlist.
And together we are IndieSponge.